Picture this. It's a quiet Saturday morning. You're sipping your coffee, enjoying the peace of your backyard oasis, when suddenly your pool, your pride and joy erupts into a tidal wave of bubbles. Not just a few bubbles, mind you, but a full-on apocalyptic foam party spilling over your deck, creeping onto your lawn, and turning your slice of suburban paradise into a scene straight out of a slapstick comedy. Now you might think, or maybe I overdid it with the chlorine tablets, or did I accidentally invent a new kind of hot tub? But then you see it. A trail of sudsy streaks leading away from your pool, a telltale white residue on the pavement, and, caught on your security camera, a familiar figure in all her glory, dumping an entire box of industrial-strength detergent into your water. And who is this suburban saboteur? None other than Karen, the self-appointed dictator of your neighborhood's HOA. Welcome to the wild world of HOA horror stories, where petty tyrants reign supreme and a single blade of grass out of place can land you a $500 fine. If you've ever lived in a neighborhood with a homeowners association, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, buckle up, because today we're diving into a tale of revenge, justice, and sudsy chaos that will make you laugh, cheer, and maybe even take a hard look at your own neighborhood dynamics. But before we get into the juicy details, let's talk about HOAs for a moment. Homeowners associations were originally designed to maintain property values and ensure community standards. Think mowing your lawn, painting your house a reasonable color, not turning your front yard into a junkyard. But in the wrong hands, HOAs can become a breeding ground for power-hungry busybodies who thrive on control. In fact, did you know that according to a 2022 survey by the Community Associations Institute, nearly 30% of HOA residents report feeling harassed or unfairly targeted by their association? That's millions of people dealing with their own versions of Karen. So what happens when a Karen goes too far? What happens when she crosses the line from annoying fines to outright sabotage? That's exactly what we're going to explore today in the story of Jake, a man who just wanted to enjoy his pool, and Karen, the HOA queen who thought she could rule the neighborhood with an iron fist. But here's the kicker. This isn't just a story of revenge. It's a story of justice, community, and the power of standing up to bullies. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll be on the edge of your seat, cheering for Jake and wondering, what would I do in his shoes? Now, before we dive in, I want to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with a Karen in your neighborhood? Maybe it was an HOA fine for something ridiculous like planting the wrong kind of flowers, or maybe it was a neighbor who thought they could dictate how you live your life. Drop your story in the comments below, because, trust me, you're not alone. And if you want to see how Jake turned a bubble-filled disaster into a neighborhood revolution, stick around. This is going to be one wild ride. It all started on a seemingly ordinary Saturday morning. Jake, a 35-year-old software engineer with a passion for DIY projects, had spent the past 3 summers perfecting his backyard oasis. His pool wasn't just a pool, it was a symbol of his hard work, a place where he could unwind after long days of coding and the centerpiece of countless barbecues with friends. But that morning, as he stepped outside with his coffee, he froze. Thousands of bubbles were cascading over the edge of his pool, a foamy tidal wave spilling onto the deck and creeping toward his lawn. At first, he thought he was hallucinating. Had he left chlorine tablets in too long? Was this some freak chemical reaction he didn't understand? But then he saw it. Sudsy streaks leading away from the pool, a white residue on the pavement, and, thanks to his recently installed security camera, a familiar figure in the footage. There she was, in all her glory, Karen, the self-appointed dictator of the HOA, dumping an entire box of industrial-strength detergent into his pool. At the HOA meeting, Jake stood up, holding his phone aloft. "I have a question," he said, his voice steady despite the rage simmering inside him. "Would you say dumping industrial-strength detergent into someone's private property qualifies as a violation?" A murmur rippled through the crowd, but Karen's smile didn't falter. "I was merely helping to maintain neighborhood cleanliness," she replied, waving a dismissive hand. "You should thank me." Jake took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. "I have security footage," he said, and the room erupted into whispers. But Karen, ever the master of deflection, claimed the footage was misleading, even suggesting Jake redesign his pool to better fit community standards. Now let's pause the story for a moment and talk about what's really going on here. This isn't just a tale of Sudsy revenge. It's a masterclass in power dynamics, justice, and the dangers of unchecked authority. Karen represents a type of person we've all encountered at some point, the control freak who thrives on making others miserable. Psychologically, this behavior often stems from a deep-seated need for control, often triggered by personal insecurities or a loss of power in other areas of life. Think about it. Karen's not just terrorizing Jake because she hates his pool. She's doing it because controlling the neighborhood is the only thing that makes her feel important. But here's the thing. People like Karen only get away with this behavior because others let them. Jake could have ignored the bubble incident, drained his pool, and moved on. But by standing up to her, he's not just defending himself. He's defending the entire neighborhood. And that's a lesson we can all learn from. How many times have you stayed silent when someone overstepped, thinking, "It's not worth the fight"? I'll admit I've been there. Years ago, I had a neighbor who complained about my dog barking. Fair enough, but then she started leaving passive-aggressive notes on my door, even though my dog was inside most of the time. I ignored it at first, but when she escalated to calling animal control with false claims, I realized silence wasn't an option. I started documenting everything, just like Jake, and eventually her complaints were dismissed. The point is, standing up to bullies isn't just about you, it's about protecting others from the same treatment. The lemonade stand fiasco. In a quiet suburb in Ohio, a 10-year-old girl named Emily decided to set up a lemonade stand to raise money for her school's art program. It was a classic American scene, kids laughing, neighbors stopping by, a picture of lemonade sweating in the summer sun. But then the HOA president, a man named Gerald, swooped in. "This is a residential area, not a commercial zone," he barked, issuing a $200 fine to Emily's parents for operating an unauthorized business. The neighborhood was outraged, but Gerald doubled down, claiming the lemonade stand lowered property values. Sound familiar? Just like Karen, Gerald used his position to bully others, but here's where the story takes a turn. Emily's parents, instead of paying the fine, rallied the neighbors. They discovered Gerald had been using HOA funds to pay for personal landscaping projects, a clear violation of state law. In the end, Gerald was removed from the board, and Emily's lemonade stand became a symbol of community resistance. And so, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jake and Matt sat back, beers in hand, watching the last of the city officials drive away. Karen, the woman who had terrorized the neighborhood for years, was gone, stripped of her HOA position, fined an ungodly amount of money, and left standing in the middle of her ruined lawn, glaring at the sudsy remains of her once perfect world. It was, In a word, poetic. But what can we learn from Jake's story? First, document everything. Jake's security footage was the key to exposing Karen's sabotage, and Matt's research into public records sealed her fate. Second, build alliances. Jake didn't win this battle alone. He had Matt, and eventually the entire neighborhood turned against Karen. Third, know your rights. Jake's house wasn't even part of the HOA, but Karen tried to control him anyway. If you're dealing with an HOA, read the bylaws, check local laws, and don't be afraid to push back.